welcome to the Kemetic How-To Guide for Egyptian Pagan and Kemetic practitioners. I'm your host, Sharon. This month, we're going to explore meditation as a part of Kemetic practice. What does that mean? Where does it come from? And how authentic is it really? Let's find out. First of all, when we say meditation today, most of us probably picture something like this. Okay, maybe I'm exaggerating just a little. Like any good Jedi, my power flows from the special effects. But pop culture, including Star Wars, gets this sort of idea from a specific type of silent-seated meditation that's called Zazen in Japanese. And it is sort of the flagship practice of the Zen school of Buddhism. Funny that. You might blame the beatniks in the 1950s for first popularizing it here in the West, but it is far from the only type of meditation that's out there. Zazen is perhaps more popular here in the West because it comes closest to the Christian idea of meditation through prayer, which is usually done silently by yourself. And certainly if you're practicing as an undercover pagan, that has its advantages. But if you're looking to build a historically informed Egyptian pagan Kemetic practice, how well does Zazen-style meditation fit into it? Unfortunately, not very well. That doesn't mean you can't use it. You can, and I'm going to give you some pointers in a few minutes. But quietly contemplating in seclusion didn't seem to be a formal religious practice in ancient Egypt. Instead, they probably reached altered states of consciousness by chanting sacred texts or rhythmically shaking sistra. Remember, the sistrum is Hathor's sacred instrument, and Hathor is the mistress of ecstatic states, states of altered consciousness. Lector priests who copied sacred texts probably achieved a deep state of concentration as they were copying texts onto papyrus. And that also happens to be a formal meditation practice in Buddhism especially. Sutra copying, it's not only an act of devotion, it's also an act of concentration and meditation. And this is actually a practice sheet for copying the title of the Lotus Sutra, actually the Odaimoku, which is Hail to, Namo Myoho Renge Kyo, the individual character sheet. It's a little guide. And so that's a modern practice that probably had forerunners in ancient Egypt when you had priests copying texts onto papyrus. Although they were doing that in order to create charged objects, books of the dead and things like that, or scrolls that would be read during rituals. But it would have been a form of meditation as well. They weren't copying just for the sake of copying, but they probably got in tune with lots of cool stuff while they were doing it. So today, that would mean that as you try to learn how to write Egyptian script, that can be an act of devotion. You can certainly get into a good state of concentration as you're learning to do it, and you could work up to a good reference for, say, the Book of the Dead, and copy the script that's provided in really good references like this. Now, as for chanting sacred texts, well, anything that we come up with at this point would be conjecture because we don't know exactly how the ancient language sounded, so anything we come up with is an educated guess. But when you consider that even the sutras that are being chanted in modern, say, Japanese Buddhist schools like the one that I'm familiar with, this is a Japanese pronunciation of Chinese characters that are themselves a translation of ancient Sanskrit texts. So you see how many permutations it's gone through. So I think we can afford a little bit of leeway, as long as we don't get cheeky about it and run into a new term that I have coined, recondescension. Now I am planning some videos that will involve reconstructed chants and things like that in the future, so stay tuned. But back to silent seated meditation for a moment. Here are a few things you can do to make the most out of it as a practice for yourself. 1. Ask yourself, why do I want to learn to meditate? What do I want to do with this skill? There's no right or wrong answer, but you do need to be honest with yourself because you can't reach a higher understanding if you're trying to avoid your own thoughts and motivations. 2. Recognize that meditation is about concentration on the present moment. It is not about spacing out, dwelling on the past, or daydreaming about the future.
Never his mind on where he was, what he was doing.
3. Be patient. Meditation is a skill, and like any other, it takes practice. 4. Realize that meditation can be work, especially if you're encountering negativity in yourself that you have to confront, which is part of the growing process. And lastly, 5, try keeping a journal and write down the bits of insight that you get as you practice. Keep it private, especially if you're practicing undercover, but keep it because you will read through it later and realize how much you've grown. This book, these notes are 20 years old. This is from when I was practicing as a Buddhist and some of the things I learned there. And I was able to see how I gained in insight and understanding, and eventually you start seeing notes about the Eye of Horus and Ra and Neat and things like that in here as well. So you want to talk about tracing a journey. Now these are just some very basic pointers about meditation. I have a lot more historical background that I can give and a little more information about the Buddhist tradition that I learned about all those years ago, and I'm going to cover that on Patreon. So if you haven't already, come join our peeps. And it's time once again for another Super Happy Dance shout out for all of our super stickers. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And of course, be sure to hit like, subscribe, check the description for more links, and we will see you next month with more good stuff for your Egyptian pagan or Kemetic practice. So for the Kemetic how-to guide, this is Sharon, wishing you Senepti.
Enjoyed this video? Then be sure to hit like and subscribe to the Kemetic Independent channel. You can also buy my books on Lulu.com, and special thanks to all my Patreon supporters. Join us for updates, outtakes, and exclusive videos only on Patreon. Check the description for links.